Welcome to Talentless, the podcast that's all HR, all talent, and zero fluff, hosted by industry talent leaders Desiree Goldie and Ashley King, and made for recruiters who think of talent outside of the box. They're here to dig into the heart of what makes workplaces tick and sometimes blow up. They are not afraid to get into the messy, the meaningful, and the downright motivating. So buckle up, because they're here to make you the best in the business. Now, let's get to work.
Welcome back to the next episode of Talentless. Today, we're talking about HR and TA. Two departments, one goal, totally different group chats. In today's episode, we're diving into the multi-layers of the relationship between human resources and talent acquisition. The good, the bad, and the who's in charge moments. We're joined by the brilliant Dani Herrera, the queen, the goddess, an award-winning LinkedIn top voice. She is here to unpack how these two power players can stop stepping on each other's toes and start dancing in sync. Spoiler, it's more than just communication. Let's get into it. Ashley, you ready for this one?
I am ready. I am so excited for this one. I have been a fan for ages, and then about 4 years ago I became a full-blown air conditioner, all for Dani Herrera, because she is phenomenal. Dani, please tell our listeners who you are. It's time. Unveil the curtain. Bring her
Let's
out.
Let's do it. So yeah, I'm Dani. I was born and raised in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I moved to New York about 10 years ago. And I've been in all things talent, recruitment, HR, talent operations, and DEI for close to 20 years now. I don't want to do the math anymore. And the work that I do now is mostly I consult and I freelance and I do fractional leadership for different companies. So my day-to-day looks very different every single day. I could be working on a training session today, and then tomorrow I could be helping you revamp your entire process. So yeah, that's me.
I love it. And you know what's funny? I think when guests come on over, they're very humble. So I do want to read the bio that you gave us, because I do think it's important for people to know.
You know what? That's true.
Dani, right?
She is so humble.
Okay,
right?
Let's do it.
You're right.
All right.
It's about to blow their mind, TBH.
It is.
Yeah.
So Dani Herrera is a talent and culture strategist with nearly 20 years of experience in recruitment, talent operations, and DEI. She's the founder of DEI by Dani and co-founder of Allies in Recruiting, where she helps companies and the people who make them what they are build hiring and talent practices that are equitable, inclusive, and built to last. Her work lives at the intersection of strategy, systems, and equity, always rooted in her commitment to make workplaces work. Huge thing. She's also a LinkedIn top voice, a sought-after speaker, and the kind of facilitator who isn't afraid to bring in storytelling, a solid pop culture reference, which we all love, and a lot of heart. I had to give it to you. I had to give you all the kudos.
You forgot to say queen of memes and gifs. Yeah,
I do my best with those. Yeah,
I love
especially the Schitt's Creek. Those are my favorite every single time.
Love it.
All right, so today, Dani, we asked you to be here because we are going to be talking about the relationship between HR and talent.
Yeah.
And I think something that we need to address is people are like, why wouldn't you have brought on an HRBP or an HR director? Why would you bring another person in for talent? And as much as I would love to have a conversation about everything that HR gets wrong, I think it's important to talk about talent and get real about where our gaps are and how we can improve to have better relationships with those in HR, so that no matter where we go, we're building bridges. So one thing that Dani had asked us whenever we were in prep for this actual episode was, how are we defining HR and talent? And it's so silly because I think we're on episode whatever now. And throughout this whole show, I don't know that we ever defined what the heck is dangdole talent and what the heck is, HR. So before we get launched into this and into our first question, I did just want to set the scene about what we are discussing. So as far as how we're delineating it for this specific episode, it is talent we will be referring to as pre-employment, prospective employment. So the whole entire hiring process. And for some companies, that also includes candidate integration. That's their new hiring onboarding. So we're leaving that little gray mark there as well. As far as HR, that is everything post-employment. So these are people who are not dealing necessarily with the hiring process. They're going to be overseeing employee relations, process, procedure, policies. They will be doing those type of things, and that's their primary set. So whenever we're talking about this today, we're really talking about people who do the hiring and then people who do, well, usually the firing and also the creating of the environment that these new hired employees will live in. So on to question number 1. When it comes to strategy, what are the roles that HR and talent play in your mind?
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you for explaining who's who and who does what, because even sometimes for us as talent professionals or HR professionals, it can be confusing based on the company, the role, the team, and how the things are done. So I think that this is, like a very good way to ground the conversation. Now, on to the strategies. Like one of the main issues or gaps that I usually see is mostly around data. And I know that we had a little bit of a pre-conversation before we recorded this, but I do believe that in talent, anything that is sourcing, talent attraction, interviewing, extending offers, and even hiring, we do tend to have a lot of data, which is very helpful, but we do not often, generalizing here, we do not look into the data as deeply as we potentially could. And the reason why I like to bring this up like very early in the conversation is because sometimes we do look into the data based on what's positive or what's expected. Like time to fill, how many candidates did we reach out to, and how many candidates did we talk to before we hired someone. However, we do not necessarily look into the negative data between a million air quotes. And what I mean by that, and I will connect it to HR in just one moment, is we don't necessarily look into what happened through the funnel and where our gaps are. So for example, if we had to reach out to 50 people to only be able to talk to one, what is the data about those 49 candidates? What is that telling us? Is the problem? Yeah, do tell me, Ashley.
Okay,
what is it telling us?
Okay, so if they are applicants, then I would say that they bought into the employer brand enough to apply and they were interested, and my reach out, I only got one response out of 50. That then means that my reach out is the issue, that there's something wrong, because now they were interested, but now there's a wall. So I would be interested in what the root cause analysis of that is. I love Dani School. If you haven't gone to Dani School, go to Dani School. Okay, continue.
It could be the reach out. It could be the job description. It could be the language that the recruiter is using whenever they are communicating or reaching out to candidates. It could be the salary band, right? Because if we are being equitable and transparent, we are sharing that information beforehand. So that could potentially be an issue. So bringing it back to data, what most recruiters do, and this is not necessarily a fault on their own, it could actually be the system that they're operating under, it could be the platform, the ITS that they are using, it could be a million different reasons, but we might not necessarily be looking into that data. And even if we do look into the data, we don't necessarily do anything with it. We don't necessarily sit down with our partners in HR to let them know, like, hey, you know what? Like, I had to phone screen 20 candidates to be able to advance with only one. And out of the 19 candidates that I talked to, what I realized is that our salary band is not enough for this role, that maybe our expectations are wrong based on the title that we are offering and the salary that we are offering and the responsibilities that we are offering, or it could be something else. It could be that we realize that maybe our job description wasn't accessible enough. or the platform that we are using, right? So yes, I think that sometimes we are really good at looking into the positive data. But even with the positive data, we are not passing it along. We are not sitting down with our friends in HR to let them know, hey, you know what? The next time that we need to hire X, Y, and Z, these are the things that we are seeing in HR. These are the trends that we are seeing in the market. These are the conversations that I'm having with the hiring manager and with the interview team. And these are the ways that we should be improving our system. So the next time that I bring a new hire, you don't necessarily have to sit down with them and talk to them in 3 months from now because their expectations are not being met. Because one of the things that happens is that sometimes HR is selling a position between a million air quotes, even though I hate that. We might be selling the position. And then when they actually join during the onboarding process and their day-to-day, they realize that the job is completely different. And the disconnect could happen at many different places. So that is one of the main and big reasons that I would love to talk about.
By being able to utilize some of this data and being the informed SME, right? The subject matter expert sitting at that table and saying, this is what I'm finding. Here's how you can do better. Here's how we can do better as an organization. HR, please help me do that. Right? And I don't think we're doing that enough. So everything that you just said just clicks all my bells. I love it, love it, love it, love it.
Yeah, I don't think that we do that enough, and I don't think that we use many of the skills that we have as recruiters enough either, right? Because we know, if you've been in the talent space, if you've been in recruiting in any shape, way, or form, you know that recruiters have many different skills and many different capabilities, right? Like in some companies, they are more on the sales side of things, even though, again, that's not necessarily my preference. But we are also project managers and we are also communicators, and we do have this aspect of strategy. However, in many roles, and again, sometimes it is on the recruiter on their own, on their individual, the person, but sometimes it's actually the team or the system or all of those things. We are not given the space, or we are not taking up that space to actually take our role to the next level. I've worked with many recruiters who profoundly believe it is not their responsibility to do anything other than just post a role, do phone screens, and move candidates along, right? And that's not enough. I mean, that could be probably, like useful in certain industries or maybe certain companies, but that's not what a recruiter is supposed to be doing. It's
I agree
so
with
much
you.
more.
And in the world of AI right now, you better be a little bit worried if that's all you're doing, right? Because a machine can do it. A robot's about to do that. So you need to be that next level of recruiter. Actually, I know that you believe in this as well. Any thoughts?
Oh yeah, I have a ton. So first thing I would say, I want to circle back on the negative data, because I feel like that is so important, because what we find is, one, negative data is how you build solutions. That's how you identify your gaps. Like, how
that's
do
where
I know
I
what
live.
bridges to build? Exactly. That's what I say. I'm like, that is my whole job. My whole job is to find your gaps and create strategic scaffolding around it, so we have a bridge that will hold up the test of time and it has scalability, etc. And so I think what's interesting whenever we talk about recruitment data specifically is, one, people are scared of the negative data. And the reason that they're scared of the negative data is because of two, our data, because we are smile and dialers, are very similar to that of salespeople and SDRs. And that's used for quota-driven, KPI, SLA, every acronym in the BOOK that you could possibly think of that they're using it for. And most of the time, recruiters, that data is thrown at them is because some manager says that they're not doing something or they're doing something wrong. So they're like, let me see how many calls they made this week. Let me see how many XYZ. It is not used to inform strategy. And again, we know it because of how it is utilized like a sales tool. Otherwise, it would be utilized to inform us. And one other thing that I want to say too is, whenever I think about the audience that has this data, I feel like it is the most under-knowledgeable subject that recruiters have. Like, they don't understand how to read a funnel. Like, if I see that we have candidates that have moved through all 3 steps of the interview and then on the final interview are getting rejected like 10, 15 times, that means there's not a misalignment with recruitment, even even though those managers are like, we haven't hired anyone, it's taking them forever, this is all on recruitment. No. What has happened is that there's a disconnect between the managers and whoever this executive chief is that's doing the final sign off. That's where your disconnect is. So now I know my bridge, but I only know that whenever I'm reading this funnel data. And so last thing, and I swear I'm going to shut up because I want to hear from you and not me because I can listen to myself in my own head, is because we aren't knowledgeable, we only do deductions, no root cause analysis. And what I mean by that is people do not know how to delineate between causation and correlation. And so just an example of this for the people in the room, my favorite example of this is in Arizona. That is the number one place that people die of lung cancer. And so if you hear that's the number one place in the United States, you might deduce that they have the dirtiest air. Like, obviously, everyone there is dying of lung cancer, et cetera, et cetera. However, whenever you actually look at the causation, what you find is Arizona actually has the cleanest air in the United States. Thus, a lot of the lung cancer facilities have built themselves in Arizona. So a lot of people who have lung cancer go there as their final resting place. So that's where they die. But if you were just doing deductions, no root cause analysis, no actual looking a few layers deep, you would just never step into Arizona because you'd be like, that's dirty air. But the truth is, you'd be missing the cleanest air on the planet. And so that's what I'm talking about whenever, all these managers are like deducing, or HR people or whomever, recruiters are deducing these things. And it's like, you have done no measures to unpeel that. And those measures are important because, like you said, there's a disconnect between HR and TA in the sense of we're selling an employer branded dream and HR is the reality of that. And if it doesn't match, we will always have a revolving door of talent because we are incongruent
100%.
In our sell. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to let Desiree lead the way.
No, but
based
on what
Dani.
you were saying, there's also oftentimes, again, we are generalizing here, but there's also oftentimes a disconnect between the recruiting team and the hiring team. And when I say hiring team, I'm talking about the interviewers, the hiring managers, right? And that's also oftentimes something that I notice when I sit down and I do, either an analysis or an audit or what's working or not working within a recruitment process. Oftentimes what I find is that the recruiting team is, like, we're passing the ball, right? Like, oh, okay, but the hiring manager didn't, brief me well enough. But then when you look into the things that are happening in TA isn't even asking any of the questions that we should be asking for, right?
Right.
And then the same thing happens with data, right? Because when we focus only, like time to fill or how many candidates we reached out to, we are missing into the things that we could be making better in our process. And that can mean anything. Maybe we realize that there is a particular hiring manager that has a tendency of rejecting XYZ type of candidate. Maybe we realize that for X type of position, our hiring process should be reverted, right? Like maybe they should be meeting with a hiring manager first before moving on to the interviewers, and so many other things. And the thing that it's really interesting, at least for me, and I know that we all would love to have a process that is, as equal for every single company out there. But the thing is, every single position and every single company should be building things that work for them specifically. Even within the same company, we cannot have the same recruiting process for an admin assistant than the process that we are putting together for a software engineer, right? Like, yes, the core and the equity of it and the transparency should be the same, but the process, the way that we reach out to candidates, the way that we communicate, the language that we are using, the questions that we are asking, the feedback that we are taking note of should be a little bit different. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. As on this show, we try to present the problem, but I also want to present solutions, right? So how do we fix this bridge that we have, this problem that we have with HR and TA? How does it become more cohesive as a partnership and not so all over the place? What are your thoughts?
So one of the things that I usually recommend is setting goals that are shared by the two teams. And sometimes there are two completely different departments. Sometimes we know that recruiting may report into HR, maybe they do something different. But the goal here is to have goals and expectations that are shared by the two departments. departments. And those goals shouldn't be, like, oh, okay, like this quarter we need to hire 10 people. That's not the type of goal that I'm looking or that I'm thinking about.
You need more concrete things.
Right.
Exactly. We need more concrete type of goals. Of course, it will really depend on the company and what they're trying to hire for and the things that they will look into.
Sure.
But we want to look into things that the two departments can do together. So for example, our next goal for the next quarter would be make sure that the process that we have in place, I don't know, for admin assistants is as equitable as possible from A to Z. And what I mean Z is the onboarding process, right? We will sit down with the HR team. We will make sure that we have a competencies for this particular role. We will make sure that the job description that we have is accurate based on the responsibilities that this person will have, that the salary that we are offering is related to what we are seeing in the job market and the information that HR has internally and externally. We are going to make sure that we are selecting an interview panel that is knowledgeable in that particular role. And then recruiting can go ahead and build a process, build the questions, post the job description, make sure that that process is equitable and all of those things. And then HR, what they can do is make sure that whenever we do hire this person, we are offering the experience that we told them about during the interview process. And we can start small. We can start with one position. We can start with one part of the process. We can start, okay, like if you want to go big, let's look into pay transparency and all of those things, right? But we need to have a goal that is shared by the two teams. Otherwise, if it's just an expectation, if it's just a guideline, we will continue falling into the old habits, unfortunately.
Love.
This episode is brought to you by DEI Labs, re-educating corporate America with immersive, data-driven DEI training for HR and hiring pros. Ready to shift systems and spark real change? Visit DEI-labs.com to get started. Need a resume that actually works? Resume Writing is a female-owned team of recruiting pros helping job seekers land the roles they deserve. Get expert help at resumewriting.com.
Love that. Love it a lot.
Superordinate goal, I think is what it's called. But they talk about like the best way to bond teams is goal sharing. Like, it's kind of like, I think about the country, it's a weird thing, but like after September 11th, how they were saying like everybody united and it's this and that, it's like a common enemy type thing. So like you're making your process the enemy and you're being like, let's get together. Like,
you are. And what I find really interesting, at least, from an external point of view, and I used to see it when I was like in-house as well, is that usually when you think about the meetings that HR has with recruiting, they're not recurring. They're not specific towards a strategy. They're not specific towards a goal. We are only meeting when there is something that we need to fix, right? Whenever we hired the wrong person, whenever we need to put together a new job description, whenever there is a fire that we need to put out. And it's not necessarily about the bigger strategy. And that's, if that's what's happening in your organization, that should be, like the very first thing that we should be thinking about. Like, how do we start finding spaces for these two departments to meet and to start actually thinking about the entire system and not necessarily that urgent fire that we are focusing or thinking about today.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I don't think that and I've talked about this offline, probably not on this show yet, but I talk about how people don't talk about recruiting and talent and HR as an ecosystem, right? It literally is an ecosystem in an organization.
It really is.
And needs to be treated like one, right? And so there should be all these things in that ecosystem that make it work. And I think we're still far away from that. And I don't know why we're so far away, but I feel like when I go into organizations, I love to hear it. Go ahead, Dani.
I think, and I know, again, we are generalizing and everything, but I think when you think about other departments within a company, right, you actually can see them working as an ecosystem or they're getting closer to it. And I'm going to give you all a very easy example. Hopefully it is easy, but whenever you work on a product, right, you have the design team, then you have the development team. And of course, they might have their differences, their problems, but they do work as an ecosystem. Like The product cannot exist without the design, and the design needs to inform how the product is going to look like and work on at the very end of the day. Why we do not see that happening with people? I think that there are two reasons. The first reason is that unfortunately for many companies and many organizations, we are still seeing people, talent, HR, whatever we want to call it, as a non-billable department situation, right? Yeah. So in those cases, for many CEOs and many C-levels executives, HR, we are losing money with HR, right? Like we are not getting any ROI in terms of revenue when we think about HR as a department, right? Of course.
Yes.
And then the other thing is that unfortunately for many CEOs and C-levels and many other organizations and levels within the organization, I believe especially now with AI and all of those things that are happening right now, we do not fully understand that our resources or the way that we actually make the company work, the way that we make money, the way that we make the product is because we actually have people working on those roles.
Right.
So unfortunately, C-level executives see people as, you know, like this thing that happens and will get solved in any way, shape, or form. Like if we do not hire individual A, that's fine. We can hire individual B. I don't see a difference on my end. Like the job is getting done at some point, right? So I think at the end of the day, unfortunately, comes down to budget and how executive leaders see the talent practice.
Putting us at
That's
the
not
kids'
an excuse
table.
though. Yeah.
They put us at the little kids' table, and you're right. It's not an excuse. Ashley, your thoughts, and then I'll ask for what the answer is to the excuse.
So yeah, first of all, little kids table for sure. I have always said and always felt like HR treats talent like the little sister. That was like, you know, late on arrival, just showed up, you know, and we're of course the typical little sister too. Like our whole job is being like, hey, come over to this club. It's so cool. Like, let's party. It's better than the club you're at. I promise. Yeah. And it's like, let's just hope we're telling the truth and that HR person that's working with us, we believe, because essentially, you know, at the end of the day, we're kind of the promoters of the club, but they're the bouncers. Like they're the ones that set the tone, all that stuff. Yeah. So for me, one thing that, I think is kind of interesting is kind of how talent originated, because it is kind of like this little unfurled branch. I know you talked about an ecosystem, which is like numerous data points. To me, I feel like this is a pyramid scheme, more or less in some ways, versus an ecosystem, even though one informs the other. I think because talent was a spin-off of like, I, as someone in HR, do not have time to screen everybody every day. I need someone to do this. And so it was kind of like passed off as like this administrative task that someone needed to do and just get on the phone and smile and dial. But throughout the years, it has now transformed. We've taken over more things to where now the impact that we have conglomerately is so large that we can't continue being reactive, can't continue not being strategic in this position and in this role. And so for me, I feel like the way that talent originated matters a lot. The case study to prove that, I feel, is what has happened with DEI. Like, we quickly in 2020, DEI reported into HR, and we saw the biggest
mistake ever.
Yeah. It was such a mess because although it dealt with people, that group is not prepared to take on that amount of an evolved profession and practice. And that's where talent is at, I think now, is like now where it is a practice, it is a profession in its own industry, which it always has been, but it was never revered. It was almost like, well, if you're a bad engineer, you can always go to talent and recruit engineers. Like that to me was what I think people thought the mentality was. And now it's this space where it's like, no, like I myself have my master's in IO psychology, specializing in behavioral psych. Like talent to me is my bag, man. Like I love hearing why people are doing what they're doing. I love the data behind all the action that we're doing in talent and things like that. Like I think another thing is people think because you're in talent, you couldn't hack it in HR. And I think now we're at a time and place where that's just not the truth. Like, people want to be in talent.
Yeah.
People want to be the club promoter.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the bouncer. I don't want to fire any of you people. Like, that's not fun for me.
And I think it goes beyond that. Like, yes, this is a yes and kind of situation, right? Because I don't personally like, like having, like the hiring and firing spectrum, right? Because there is so much more to both talent and HR.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And if 100%.
And if we are looking only to talent, like, as you were saying, Ashley, like, talent now is way more than just, like posting a job and then hoping for someone to show up. It's employer branding, it's inclusive communication, is communications, is a liaison between the organizations or the universities that you're going to be working with. It's community building. That there is a reason why nowadays we do have so many organizations and so many roles in community building within the company, because that's another layer, another bridge that we learned that was missing when we started to look at talent and HR a little bit more strategically. Like, community building, yes, 100%, it's something that, a recruiter can actually do at a very tiny scope, and then HR can do it also at a very tiny scope, but it is a role that now is new, between a million quotes, and it kind of, was born after all of the things that we've seen change within the talent space. And I do think that if we continue in the way that we are hopefully moving forward to, we will get more of these strategic opportunities and more strategic roles, because at the end of the day, every single individual that we are going or that we are hoping to attract to come join our company, they all have very specific and individual needs, and all of those needs, they need a little bit more attention than just like what a regular recruiter can offer, right? So there is so much opportunity for more strategy in there.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I think this is where talent is going, right? It's getting away from just pushing paper. It's getting into being strategic for an organization that wants to make profit, right? We understand that. How does people tie to that? How do you make that work for an organization? That's the mindset we need to be in when we go into these roles now, because talent and the world of the way we work is changing, right?
Yeah.
And how that changes talent definitely affects us, because now we have to be the strategists at the top of the day. And I love that theory. It's always been my theory, is that talent has to be the strategy person, which I happen to be good at, but that is what I think we need to be giving to organizations, whether we sit in a high volume role, whether we sit at executive level, whatever we sit in, there is strategy to how we recruit, how we build talent, 100%. What the data says, and how we can affect an organization's bottom line. And it's
100%. And I think that part of that strategy, it's also going back to something that we were just talking about, is communication and storytelling, right? Because even if you ask a regular person outside of recruiting or talent, the idea that they have about what a recruiter does, it's, like the same idea that they had about like 10, 20, 30 years ago. Right. Again, it's just, like maybe sourcing, posting a role, phone screening, and then we all know, what the general public thinks about recruiting, right? But that is so far from the truth. So I think that there is another thing in there that unfortunately many of us as an industry, we've been failing at. We haven't been able to communicate clearly to candidates, to HR, to the C-level. What is the value of recruiting or talent? What are the things that we could be doing, and how are the ways that we could be collaborating with every single department within the company, right? And I know that we are mostly focusing on a relationship with HR, but recruiting should also have a very strong relationship with finance. They should also have a very strong relationship with internal communications, with community, and even with the departments that they are hiring for, right? We cannot be a tech recruiter without actually having a very, very strong relationship and connection with our CTO and with the software engineers that we are working with. So that is another aspect of the conversation that we might want to pay a little bit more attention to.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Thinking of the fact that you're talking about these like employee experience people, like that literal job is created because there is such a disconnect from HR
Yes.
talent and communication that they have attrition that it's costing them. So they went and hired a person to be like, hey, what's the gap here? Why aren't people staying? Like, what's going down? And it's like, because you're selling what isn't reality, or once they get into reality, HR hasn't actually set it up like they sold they would.
Yeah.
So it's something you make interesting.
And that's
points,
another
I love
yes
it.
and situation. Maybe that's how it started, and I love it. I think that even when you have the best relationship ever between recruiting and HR, you still need candidate experience.
For sure.
For sure.
You need a team
Yes.
paying attention to the things that recruiting can no longer pay attention to because that's not responsibility, and HR cannot pay attention to because they're busy doing a million other things.
Oh my gosh. I can't tell you enough about how I've sold a person on a team or a company or an organization, and then they go through onboarding and it's a disaster, right?
Yeah.
Or they don't get follow-up, or where's my paper? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I spent probably a couple of months with you to get you to this finish line, and now it's going nowhere. So, we could talk about that all day too. That's a whole nother show. It really is. But yeah, so for me, like all of those connecting dots need to be there, right? Marketing. I work in marketing and talent now. Like, you need to be talking to marketing. You need to be talking to all of these other departments and really understand what the organization's goals are and how we can assist. And they also need to be talking to us to assist us. And I think that's the missing piece for me. It's that all those cohesive points that need to happen that aren't happening right now in this ball of
They're not
of talent.
happening.
No,
and it's
they're not.
unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
And we can also think about why it's not happening. Of course, like talent has been going through, like the market for talent has been very difficult for the last couple of years,
tough.
right? So maybe we do start working on something and then we have to go backwards like 50 steps, and now we have one recruiter doing the job of 10 different recruiters that were at that company, last year. So it is difficult. It is complicated. We can still find ways to do it, even if you're a one-person team. And I know how it sounds, but it can be done. Yeah,
absolutely. Dani, I can't tell you enough. This has been absolutely fantastic. We're going to have you back. This energy in this room was so good for me. I love it, love it, love it. But I want to know how you have to tell our listeners how they can find you, book you, and make sure they can navigate this crazy place we call talent. Please let us know.
All of the things. You can all find me on LinkedIn. Obviously, I spend pretty much my every second of every day there as well. I do have a website, www.deibydani.com. But if you really want to start, building community with me, LinkedIn is the place to be.
Oh, I love it. I love it. This is our part of our podcast where we get into the stuff you didn't know before. This is the psychological side of what we've been talking about. Ashley King, it's your floor.
Woof! About time. Jeez Louise. Been holding my tongue. Nah, I'm just kidding. Dani, I love that you were here. And to be honest, Dani, a conversation that we had during prep is actually what prompted this stuff you didn't know for this week. So essentially, let's just go into stuff you didn't know first. Then we'll go into the Dani story so it all makes sense. But
let's do it.
So in social psychology, researchers have found that individuals have what is typically called kicking or lifting behaviors. And what this means is that researchers followed individuals to see if whenever they got to a point of power, did they bring anyone with them? And so essentially, whenever you have people who are lifting, this is the idea that I, as a woman, make it to the C-suite, thus I turn around and I will lift other women to the point of an executive C-suite role or whatever to help them leverage mobility as well. The other option is kicking, and that is whenever there are people who you can turn around, reach, and lift, but instead you choose to kick. So the way that researchers looked at this was actually following females, specifically Hillary Clinton. And so they found that once females actually get into a high executive group, they then want to assimilate with the males in that group since they are the predominant dominant group. And what they find is that they will have kicking behaviors. And so any other women that try to break into that ceiling, then kind of a corporate form of hazed, if you will, to say, hey, I had to do XYZ and it was this hard for me, thus you should have to too. Yeah. And they are actually usually the number one person that is kicking them down from the opportunity. And the interesting part is whenever they were studying Hillary Clinton, they noticed that the person who's the worst at this is actually white women were really, really bad at kicking behavior. And then the people who are the best at it, they were actually following Barack Obama, and they found that those in the African American community are actually really, really good at lifting. And oftentimes once they do like shatter whatever glass ceiling it is, they often then do reach back behind them to pull up others in their community as well. So that is the difference between kicking and lifting. That is the research on Hillary. The reason that we're sharing this today is because over 70 to 80% of HR and talent is female driven. If you are a female in talent and you are like, I'm a good lady, I know what I'm doing, ask yourself right now, how many women in my life that I can think of off the top of my head am I helping to mobilize somewhere in their life? Who am I reaching behind to lift up? And if you can't think of anyone off the top of your head, odds are you might not be kicking, but you definitely aren't turning around and lifting. Yeah, so let's get our lift on. Lastly, the reason that this was picked for this week is because Dani Herrera and I have been in the same circles. I think our first call was either 2022 or 2023. I cannot recall.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was actually looking at it because we did a whole episode in Spanish. Not me.
We did.
One of my who kind of launched DEI Labs with me. One of my partners kind of did that for me with Dani because I was like, I can't speak Spanish, but I think it would be powerful. The moral of the story is as far as optics are concerned, Dani and I are competitors. And so whenever we were prepping for this episode and we were like, hey, plug all of your stuff, she was like, well, I don't know because it's this. And so I want to say, I asked her if we could make this conversation a little public because I think that it's super duper important, specifically whenever we're talking about women in leadership and even entrepreneurial or whatever clientele. In all theories of the word, we're competitors. But here's the deal. As much as we're competitors, we're not. I know that Dani is a vetted and great resource, so much so that if for any reason DEI Labs wasn't getting anything, it better be Dani. It better be I never want other women to feel like they have to be like, oh, let me hide my light because it might compete with, no, this space, especially DEI and especially talent, and especially just adult education in general, it takes all kinds of kinds. Who meshes with me will not be who meshes with you or does it, and things like that. And I think it's just so important for us to know that this space is big and not get stuck in our heads to try to be competitive as women with sharp elbows, but rather to say, actually, not only are you my competitor, I would love to platform you because if not me, because again, I am not for everyone, it should be Dani. And if it's not Dani, then it should be, and the list goes on, right? And so it's just something that if there are women in this space listening today and you are feeling competitive with someone else maybe in the same space, just take a step back and be like, hey, how fortunate that we can both be here, both be competent, and both feel so threatened that we rise to the level of the occasion and we get more competitive. I think it's Simone Biles. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking right now. I don't think all of that's going to make the cut because that's way too dang long. But women, just lift, ladies. It's a love language. Be better.
Be better. Do better.
I want do better. That's right. Well, that is the end of our show. Thank you for listening. Dani, thank you so much again. And we will see you all next time. Bye-bye. I'm Desiree.
And I'm Ashley. And thanks for listening to Talentless, where we keep it real in the world of HR.
If you loved what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe and give us a follow on Blue Sky, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We're here to keep your feed packed with everything you need to level up in recruitment and HR.
And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And hey, don't miss out. Sign up for our newsletter for fresh insights and follow us on socials to stay connected with both Ashley and me.
Thanks again for joining us on Talentless. Until next time, we'll see you then.